As this interview is progressing, we're starting to learn more about each other and getting comfortable with each other. So one of my group members in my interview group starts to talk about his experience while living in Afghanistan. And he tells us a story about one time when the Taliban invaded his home, put a gun to his father's head, and told him to leave the country or they'll be dead in 3 days. And to say the least, that's where the interview got really, really interesting. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to SalMed, and in this week's video we're going to be talking about my experience in my first medical school interview. As you guys know, I'm a part of the LECOM Early Assurance Program, so during my senior year of high school I had the opportunity to interview with this program. So to say the least, my path to medical school is actually a pretty untraditional path and isn't something an ordinary medical student or undergraduate student may experience. As I alluded to in some of my early videos, I was actually on the cusp of whether I wanted to practice medicine or if I wanted to practice pharmacy. During my high school years, I did a lot of research and looked into these combined programs, similar to LECOM's, and I found similar programs to pharmacy school, which are referred to as 0 to 6 pharmacy school programs. In these programs, you actually do 2 years of undergraduate studies as opposed to the traditional 4 years and 4 years of pharmacy school. So you save 2 extra years. So instead of doing 8 years of schooling, you're down to 6 years. I interviewed for 2 of those programs and got accepted to both. So during my senior year, I got accepted early onto these programs, so I was pretty set on pursuing pharmacy, and I wasn't really looking into many other options at the time. From what I remember, one of my family members mentioned something about a program in Pennsylvania that guarantees you a seat in medical school with no MCAT from high school, and mentioned LECOM. So I decided to kind of look into this. Keep in mind, I was already accepted to pharmacy school and these pharmacy programs, so I wasn't really thinking that deeply into these programs and wasn't really thinking at the time, oh, maybe I really do want to practice medicine. I was kind of set on pharmacy at the time, even though earlier in the school year, I was really on the edge of if I wanted to become a doctor or a pharmacist. When I really thought about it, I kind of realized a doctor really has that leadership role on the healthcare team. I wanted to have that leadership role, and at the end of the day, I wanted to be the one that makes the final decision of what happens in that patient's life. I did some research and I was like, wow, I found out this program was absolutely amazing. I decided to apply, and a few weeks later I found out that I qualified for an interview. In December of 2016, I found out that I qualified for an interview, and my interview was scheduled for January of 2017. So it gave me about a solid month to really prepare for this interview. What I really did to prepare for these interviews was, if you go to Student Doctor Network, if you go to Reddit, or even if you go on Google and look up common medical school interview questions, you'll see a few key questions that are always brought up in medical school interviews. What I really tried to do was I would make a Google Doc and I would write down key points of stuff that I needed to mention if these questions were brought up. You don't want to memorize these questions word for word, because if these questions are brought up, you don't want to sound like a robot when you have this memorized few sentences and you're just speaking it out. You do not want to do that. What you want to do is write out just a few key points you want to mention and make sure that you mention those key points, because at the end of the day, you want to try to tell these interviewers why they should accept you and why they should want you in their school. Some of the most common questions were, why medicine? Why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to come to our specific school? Tell me about yourself. What do you like to do? What do you like to do on your free time? What's your biggest failure? What's your biggest success? And a lot of these questions were personal, and as I said earlier, you really want to show these interviewers or the school of why you deserve to be there. Most of these interviews end with some sort of philosophical question, which literally can make or break your interview. Really take time and think about your answer, and the safest bet for you is just to use your common sense. Don't think about it too deeply and answer the question. My philosophical question was, if you're a student on your 3rd or 4th year rotation and you're with your attending physician and your physician prescribes this patient A, for example, 400 milligrams of medication B, right? And you know that medication B should only be prescribed at a maximum dose of 50, and you're for sure of it. How do you approach that situation? So my answer to that question was, you don't want to be rude and want to seem like you're ignorant in front of the attending physician or the nurses or whoever's there. You really want to make yourself seem like you're just curious when you're asking the question. So you could go up to your attending physician and be like, Dr. So-and-so, why are you prescribing 400 milligrams of this medication? Could you just explain the reasoning to me? Because if there is a mistake, you're allowing him to double check his work, as well as you're also learning from the experience, because maybe there is a reason why this specific amount is being prescribed, or maybe you thought you were right, but you're actually wrong. So when you're answering these philosophical questions, use your common sense, take time and think about it. There's not any issues with, if there's a question addressed to you, to really take time, think about your answer, and then go ahead and address the question. Make sure to dress nice. You want to look presentable. Wear a suit. If you're a female, make sure to dress accordingly based on what a female should wear. I'm not really aware of that, but as a male, I know wear a suit, wear good dress socks, don't wear white socks, wear clean polished dress shoes. If you don't have one, you can go rent one or borrow one, but really try to make yourself look presentable, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned, you want to show this school why they should have you and why they should want you. So to talk about my actual interview, it was a group interview. So we started off, before we even get to the interview part, we started off about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we got there and there was a short 45-minute presentation. During this presentation, it's actually a great time to learn about the school, and you want to bring some of these points up in the actual interview. So when they're doing the presentation and they're trying to sell you that their school is the best, you want to mentally make notes of these points that they're making, because you can bring up these points when they ask you, why do you want to come to our school? For example, LECOM has a very, very high board passage rate. So when they asked me, why do you want to come to our school? I said, well, you're offering great education, which is going to lead to a great board score, and you're also offering it at a very, very low tuition cost. LECOM is actually one of the cheapest medical schools in the country, which is great because you're getting a great quality education for a great price. So while these presentations are happening, which most common med schools have, you really want to make mental notes of what are some things that I could take from this presentation, address in my interview. Back again to the actual interview, which I was supposed to answer before. The actual interview was a group interview. So there were 7 other people in the room with me that were also interviewing, and there was 2 interviewers at the end of the table. It was really interesting dynamic because I was not expecting a group interview. I was expecting like a one-on-one interview like my pharmacy school interviews were. It was just a one person one-on-one or 2-on-1, meaning 2 people were questioning me. I think one interview was 4 people questioning me. So this group interview aspect was actually something that was really new to me. And this really changed things up because you really have to adapt to how you speak in a group, right? Because you don't want to be that person that's always speaking first every time. You don't want to be the person that's interrupting. So it's kind of interesting because it really allows you to showcase that you're also a good listener, and that you can also address other people's opinions and listen to their opinions and see what experiences they've had. You really want to make this a conversation, right? You don't want to make it sound like it's like 1v7, like you trying to go up against like 7 other people. You want to make this enjoyable. Make it a conversation. Have a conversation with your interviewers, with the people in your group. Overall, the interview went great. They asked great questions. They kept the conversation going. And I thought I did a really good job of listening as well as addressing the questions that the interviewers were asking. So I think like the most challenging question for me was, tell me about yourself. And I know it seems like it's a very simple question, but you have to find a way of how do you answer this question without making yourself seem like a jerk. So what I did to prep for this question was I took some of my accomplishments in terms of extracurriculars as well as athletics, and I bundled it together with my experience just of who I am. So I told them my ethnicity, where I'm from, where I was born, where I lived previously, what my parents do, what my brother does, and I mixed it in at the end saying what accomplishments I've done. And they just really want to know who you are, what accomplishments you might have accomplished that you want to share, some fun facts about you, just a typical, like, just tell me about who you are. And I don't know, for me, that was kind of hard because I really had to dive deep and figure out, well, what have I done? What can I say that I'm, that's special about me that makes me different from other people, right? So for me, it was a good experience because I really was able to learn how to address that question. At the end, I thought I did a pretty good job. So the interview was going great, but as I mentioned in the first part of the video, this is where it got really interesting. One of my group members was actually from Afghanistan, and he came as a refugee, and he was interviewing for this program. And he was talking about his experience of living in Afghanistan and how one day he came home to the Taliban into his house and they're all holding guns. And one of them has a gun held to his father, and his father and this Taliban member is just having a conversation. And he says that they were threatening his family, telling them they have to leave in 3 days or else they'll be killed. And it was really interesting because this person was actually a practicing physician in the country of Afghanistan. He was a doctor, right? And he says that when he came to this country, the qualifications didn't match up, so he has to redo medical school. But he was sharing like some of his experiences of treating US soldiers, treating people who had their legs, destroyed from an IED or a bomb or a gunshot wound. And he's seen some of the most horrific stuff. And it was really, in comparison, it made me seem like, who am I? I'm just like a kid from Cleveland, Ohio that is in high school and whatever. So it was really interesting because at the end you learn a lot of other people's experiences. But I mean, he didn't like take the show, he didn't steal the show. He was like very nice, genuine kid. And the interviewers did a great job of, handling that conversation and what questions to ask and how to bring it back to medicine. The entire interview process lasted about 45 to 40 minutes. And it was a great time. Just have fun with it. Really, be able to listen to people. Now that everything's on Zoom, I don't know how it's going to work. Maybe it'll be a one-on-one interview. Same thing though, you're not going to be having those conversations with other people, but you'll still be having that conversation with the person that's interviewing you. If any of you have any further questions about the interview process of how it went, what are the do's and don'ts, any specific questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I will for sure address them. With that, guys, this wraps up this week's video. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the share button, share it with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.